Are we good to go? Are we good to go? Yes. So, hello everyone. Thanks for codebase organizing this event and Startup Estonia supporting it. Anyways, my name is Mikk Mangus, as you can see on the slide, I hope. And I hope you can hear me. We had some troubles here with the setup. Today, the topic I'm going to cover is, for me at least, something that I'm actually dealing daily nowadays. And I do have a few slides, but I hope very much that you will be asking some questions, so I can give you maybe some more insights and practical examples of what I have in mind. So I've titled it Change the Only Constant. I can of course go very philosophical here, but what I'm basically talking about in general is that everything, all the environment and everything around us changes all the time, and we need to adapt when dealing with software development. So a short agenda of what I'm going to talk about or cover. I hope to cover it, I would say, in less than an hour, but nobody told me how long I need to take or not take, so let's see how it goes. It's very much dependent on how many questions you will be asking. So first I'll just give you an introduction about myself and my current employer, which is Pipedrive. Then I'll tell you something that you all know already, which is waterfall versus some more agile framework for developing. And then I will pinpoint some problems with agile, at least the ones that we see in Pipedrive. I'll then briefly introduce you to Pipedrive mission framework. That's definitely one spot where, feel free to ask all sorts of questions. There are some, we are not claiming that this is the perfect framework, but I see that there are many benefits this framework has. And then I'll visualize for you generic balance that I've found is very important in life, not only in software development, but in many other aspects. And in the end, I'm just going to give you some principles that are guiding me. That's pretty much it. And if I didn't tell you yet, then actually I expect all of you to be asking questions all the time, meanwhile, in between, every way. So I hope that the setup for that is good enough. I'm doing it myself all the time. So if you know me, I'm that kind of a person that if you start a sentence, I will cut you off and then ask a question. And I encourage you to do the same. Any questions? No? Okay, so briefly about me. I'm not going to go too much into details. If you're curious, of course, you can ask. Well, basically, I have been an engineer my whole life, which is, I'm pretty old already, so it's around 20 years. And I've dealt with many different technologies, but in general, like the biggest chunks for me have been like PHP. Then at some point, I turned to Java, and then to JavaScript. We can talk about that as well, by the way. I'm not, maybe somebody disagrees with this sequence. I actually find this sequence very organic, and it all makes sense. And I would prefer working with JavaScript nowadays, which is very strange, maybe. Strange statement. Also, I claim to know something about relational databases. And that's actually one thing that I was teaching in IT college for 7 years. Java classes and something about databases. And my current employer, I worked at Pipedrive since 2018, so a little more than 4 years. And I started as a backend engineer, but now I have converted into engineering manager, which I've been for a little more than a year. Any questions now?
Where did you work before Pipedrive?
Where did I work before Pipedrive? Good question. I've worked in many different, it's literally been 20 years, so, but right before Pipedrive, I was in a small startup which was called Indoor.Ninja. I was a software architect there. but basically I was doing development. I have worked in Defendec, for instance, another startup. Then Helmes is a well-known name, maybe still alive nowadays. The study information system that, what is it even called? Well, it's ois.ee. Anyways, I think it's still alive. So it, from the scratch, in the beginning, was built by me and one other guy. So I've done a few things. You can look at my LinkedIn. I actually recently updated my information there. Any other questions?
Why JavaScript?
Why JavaScript? Keep that question in mind. I mean, let's cover some other topics. I have one more slide, and then we can jump into the war about JavaScript. I have a good answer to that, actually. So briefly about Pipedrive. Pipedrive, you might know if you're an Estonian that it's an Estonian unicorn, but shortly it's a sales software, a CRM as it's usually called, or customer relationship manager or something like management software. It's 12 years old right now. I think it was 2010 that it was, started, so it must be 12. We have more than 100,000 customers, and it's B2B business, meaning customer in this case means a company that is paying money for us, basically. So it's a subscription based, so we are generating MRR, or monthly generating revenue. We have 10 offices all around the world. Actually, only 4 of them, let me quickly calculate. Yeah, it's no, 5. Only half of them are where development also happens, like others are just supporting roles. But the software development only happens in half of them, in 5. Around 1,000 employees today and 300 plus engineers. It's always a bit tricky to calculate how many engineers you have because there are many technical supporting roles. But around half of the people in the company are technical, and strictly doing the engineering is around 300 plus. And yeah, as I said, we turned unicorn in 2020 when the company was sold. Anyways, why I'm pointing all of it out is, of course, just to set the scene, because if you compare it to some other companies, then you might have different issues there. But if the size is similar, then it might be similar issues. From technical side, we are very much doing microservices. So we have, I think the number might be 700 already, but it doesn't matter. 600 plus microservices in live. We have 7 live regions. We're actually planning to open 6 more this year. So it's going crazy with that. Just to briefly recap on this, we are opening more regions. It doesn't exactly mean that we are expanding like crazy. What it means is we are just splitting up bigger regions to smaller ones. And also swapping out. Okay, I'm not going to tell it because I just realized that maybe it's not public information. So basically, we are just swapping out the host. And we are deploying a lot. So it's on good days, I guess it's even more than that, like 150 deploys a day or something. For that, we have a really cool internal tool that makes it all possible. I mean, of course, if I say 150 deploys to live a day, I don't mean that everything changed. It's like every microservice update to live counts as a deploy here. Any questions about Pipedrive? No? Everybody has heard of it. Okay, I also have a really nice video for you to watch because this is cute. Even if the sound doesn't come through, the sound is not that important. Let's see. Maybe some of you have seen this video. So this is a beaver in a house. I'm not exactly sure why a beaver is in a house, but it is. And then it's very cute that it just goes around the house, finds some stuff, and builds a dam in the house. Let's look at it for a little more. So it's really cute. But guess what struck me when I was watching this video. The question I got in mind was that, let me see if I can somehow move. Oh yeah, what was the beaver missing, or what was it failing with?
Well, it had a hammer and every problem was a nail.
Can you repeat, please?
He had a hammer and every problem.
Yeah, basically, true story. So the beaver had a hammer and every problem was a nail. That's exactly what I was thinking. Not exactly in this wording, but the idea is that the beaver was truly building a dam in the building. It's very cute. It's very nice to see it do that. Nobody gets harmed, like all is good. But at the same time, he literally doesn't understand that the thing that he does is not useful. So, and this is exactly what can easily happen in like any kind of environment actually, but more often than not in software development as well, if you don't consider that something has changed meanwhile. So that's the point I'm wanting to make here. Any other questions so far? Did you like the video?
This is an old video, yeah?
This is an old video, so you didn't like it?
No, I mean, maybe I was expecting some super nice ending.
Okay.
Like,
We didn't watch till the end. Probably you were expecting some super nice ending. We didn't watch till the end. Maybe in the end there was something really nice. Okay. But let's briefly just look into software development methodologies or strategies or whatever we call them. So there is one out there which has a very clear structure, which is a good thing. It's very intuitive and clear timeline, which is very important. You're able to predict stuff much better if you have a better timeline. It's clear goals for what needs to be achieved, and it's easy to follow. Probably there are other things about this methodology that are good. And I think you're all familiar with this methodology. It's called waterfall. At the same time, although it has many of these good aspects, we all know that nowadays nobody would do waterfall because the plan keeps changing, and waterfall just by default doesn't allow you to change any part of your plan, or I don't even know how to implement it in waterfall. If you have a change in plans, what would happen? Basically, yeah, that's the second point, basically, that if some changes happen, your previous work just has no value anymore. So any delay in any phase would cause delay in another phase and so forth. So you're all familiar with these problems, I guess. Yeah, outcome visible only in later stages. Also often actually the failure is only apparent in later stages. So you need to go all the way through to realize that something is wrong. And last but not least, I've pointed out here that the teams in a waterfall system is rather static usually. And then there are lots of different approaches to incremental software developments where you have a cycle and you're trying to iterate within a shorter period of time. So you would have almost constant delivery, or at least, if I say constant, I don't think that you need to deliver every day, but maybe you have a sprint and you deliver every week or at least every month or something. You can adjust the product for whatever purposes, basically take account all the feedback that you have. So the feedback loop is rather short for whatever you want to basically build it against. Usually, I use the word against, but I mean like for. So usually you build the stuff for a client, so you can actually have a feedback loop with the client. And also not only just adapt to changes, but take advantage of changes. So when something actually changes in life, you can build a different product maybe. So all the plan can change. So one of the most used incremental strategy is Scrum. And Pipedrive, when I joined, basically was using Scrum. It was very much using Scrum. It's just that, of course, whenever Scrum is being used, almost never it's used like by the book. But it was almost used by the book there. And they had some issues with it. By the way, I right now sound as if I changed the way they worked. No, I didn't. I just joined it, and then they were in this situation of changing it. Most importantly, I would point out that there were culture and technical silos. So if you know how Scrum works, or even like any other software team nowadays, then the default standard for an engineering team is around 7 people. And those 7 people are pretty static together, and they're doing their job. Whatever has to be done, they just deliver it constantly, iterate over it, and so forth. And it's really nice. Actually, something gets done, and you can see, constantly some moving on. But the problem is that when the organization grows bigger, you actually have multiple of those teams, and those teams start to build stuff on their own. And it's easy to happen. Like they just don't interact with each other well enough, basically. And it's technical silos, like which we usually care the most, but actually cultural silos as well. Like you feel that you belong to one group but not the other. Actually, it's the same company. You're all working for the same company. Also, because of the number of engineers you usually apply into one team, there was a big management overhead, because you would basically have a manager for each of those teams, and then on top of that you need some other layer maybe to manage it all and so forth. So if you get to hundreds of engineers, then actually you will have tens at least of managers, and the organization structure basically raises pretty high pretty quickly, so it won't be a flat line anymore. And then to organize some specific parts of some planning and so forth, especially on the technical side, you have some central roles. For instance, Pipedrive used to have architects, people who were like actually trying to define which way we should move. They were not like regular engineers, but they were like separate. They were carrying a separate role, being architects, and telling basically the smaller teams that, oh, do this or do that. I mean, you can already maybe think ahead with me, like what is the problem with having architects like this? The problem is that the architects, it's hard to communicate them something to the engineer, that something should be done in this way or another. At the same time, they don't have visibility, and many times everybody is dependent on that one architect. If they go to vacation, like nothing happens, or happens in a different way that they anticipated. In the end, actually, having those teams turned into poor predictability as well. Although I don't think this is like a non-universal or like specific to Pipedrive issue. It's I would say an issue with any kind of agile methodology, that basically you can't predict stuff pretty well, because you just say that life will happen. And also hiring and retention, it wasn't that easy. Hiring into the teams, whenever you added a person to the team, and when the team got maxed out, you need to organize this. The Scrum methodology a lot depends on the fact that the teams are static. If you change the team slightly, it all breaks down, like story points make no sense anymore. So all of that combined drove Pipedrive into building this kind of missionware framework. I will explain some parts of it. I hope you have some questions as well. But most importantly, as you understand, we have here, like teams are no more called teams, but they are called tribes. So that's a good thing. And the projects are no more called projects, but they are called missions, because missions are cool and you can use rockets everywhere like this. I mean, I'm joking here, of course, but at the same time, which company would you like to work on, where everybody's making fun of something that they're doing and using rocket emojis, or in another company where everybody's very tedious and doing stuff by the book that doesn't have rockets? Second one. Nice. I'm pretty sure you have these companies as well, and they are using waterfall. Okay, but actually the reason to call teams tribes is very important. I mean, tribe is not actually a team as such, because tribe is a bigger group or bigger definition. as it tries to illustrate here as well, tribe is basically a bigger set of people. We have experimented with different sizes of tribes for over 4 years now, and we have experimented from, I don't know, 9 or even 7 engineers till 40 engineers in one tribe, and we've come to the conclusion that 15 to 20 with this structure is good, like the good size to aim at. So basically the tribe, I would say, is up to 20 engineers, and then engineers have some initiatives which we call missions, which is just a chunk of work that they focus on, like you could call it a project, but we call it a mission. And then they go on the mission and do their stuff and so forth. We don't have a project manager as such, or mission manager. Every mission is led by a mission lead who is always an engineer. And often, of course, if the mission has some product output, then the product manager is involved in this a lot, and designers as well, if there is any need of it. But by default, every engineer belongs to Launchpad. So each tribe has a Launchpad, which is just a maintenance mode or fixing bugs, doing this generic stuff, maintaining the software basically, most of the time. Not saying that on Launchpad you are not going to do some tasks that actually add something extra to the product. You do, but kind of that was the idea. And that was not it. I mean, that there is more to it. For instance, we didn't have any more. We don't till now actually. So this structure pretty much has stayed the same. It's just that some aspects of it might not be working the best. But we don't have, for instance, any specific roles in the company anymore. So everybody is basically an engineer, but we do have guilds that are responsible for some things. And guild is just a voluntarily organized group of people from different tribes. All of it actually mostly works for engineering, so guilds are also mostly engineering based. Other part of other organizations in the company don't work that way precisely. But for instance, we have architecture guild. So instead of having architects, we have multiple people coming together and discussing the problems, coming up with some solutions. I mean, you can already think what are the positive sides of it. Like people get notified by the updates much better. The communication is much better. Everybody can say their word. Because usually the ARC guild meeting it was just held today. I think we had like 40 people in the hall, so it's not like a random, very small group just deciding on something. Actually, everybody is able to say the word. Or we have front end guild. We have many kinds of guild. Even we have a guild for the mission framework to try to evolve this structure on its own. Or for instance, we have a guild for engineering career guild, which means that. What's the way we should even promote people in engineering? There is a guild to define this structure as well, and this mostly consists of engineers. I hope you have some questions. I do have a few more slides. I was lying that I have 3, but it's pretty much the last one.
So who is coming up with the missions?
Who is coming up with the missions? Very good question. For technical missions, often it's engineers, of course. And so there are some missions which don't require any PM, product manager, or designer input, and at the same time there are of course product missions. So those missions mostly come from product management side. And actually, my role in Pipedrive right now as an engineering manager is to be like a head of one of these tribes. So most of the time, what I'm actually doing is I'm syncing up with product at the same time, seeing what are the possibilities and pain points in engineering, and basically myself and the product manager are mostly coming up with the missions, I would say. Often, of course, the idea comes from engineering, but then I'm kind of like validating and trying to put it to the timeline, basically.
So you're the one who's deciding which mission gets the money and which one doesn't?
In the end, right now, I think I would say, so the question was that whether I'm deciding which mission gets to run, then I would say that right now it is actually like this. Of course, engineers are pretty much free to do what they want, or I mean, that's my own take on it.
Without money?
but they still need to sync with me, or if they don't have my buy-in on whatever they want to build, then of course I might not like it. For instance, I would guess one of the things at this point of time I wouldn't like that much would be that if they just want to rewrite something for, it's actually working, but it's in a bad way, written in a bad way, let's rewrite it. I would be at least today a bit against it, because just rewriting it to look better. If you look into the code, it might not be that much important. Maybe we have some other initiatives that are more important, of bringing some more value to the customer or even to the engineer themselves. So it's not that people are just randomly coming up with ideas and running the mission right away. No, it is that it's still a collaboration between people, of course, but the start is exactly that everybody can contribute and come up with an idea.
How is it different than having a master architect who decides what to do?
So the question was, how is it different than having a master architect on what to do? Well, this is just one of the tribes that I'm leading. We have, I think, around 20 or 15 to 20 tribes right now. 20, I think, is the number, or somewhere there. So yeah. And at the same time, product side is also pushing. They have something they want to deliver. So it's just a collaboration that should we do this or that, and in which order we should run this stuff. But I'm nowhere close to being just one guy saying how to do stuff in Pipedrive. And I mean, there isn't anybody who could say that. Even our CTO, I don't think, has this power right now. They can influence it for sure, but not that let's do it this way and everybody agrees. It doesn't work like that. Yes?
But how much changed after the previous CTO left?
How much changed from what?
After the CTO left?
Oh, good question. So our CTO was swapped previous year. How much has changed since then? Definitely the new CTO, I mean, it's very private topic in that sense, but the new CTO definitely has its own style, which is different from the previous one. But I think as it is almost always with top management people, is that when they join a company, they need to adapt themselves. They can't really force their own style on people, and this pretty much has happened with our CTO as well. So there are some aspects where they try to drive, and then of course over time it will actually change. But for instance, right now it's only been 1 year that I think it was exactly 1 year, because I think they joined in January, yeah, I haven't seen a big difference. Of course there is like some other initiatives going on in the company overall. For instance, to be more compliant to GDPR. And this is something our CTO really has been pushing, and actually previous year we made huge progress on that topic. So, but overall, yeah, I don't know how to answer even. Definitely there has been changes, but I'm not sure if everything has changed because our new CTO. So that has changed. Any other questions?
How do you handle membership of guilds? Is it open and just people from the missions join and listen in but are not active?
Mm-hmm.
Is it completely open, or you have to officially join and leave,
Mm-hmm.
or how does it work?
Good question. So how we manage guilds or running the guilds? Are guilds free to form on their own, and how are guilds free to be run and so forth? Mostly it's just somebody comes up with the idea that, okay, let's have a guild for this. As for guilds, we have a page where we try to keep track of them, but it's guilds, I would say, is 90% voluntarily based. So they just come up with a group of people that decide that we need to do stuff this way. Sometimes they push stuff on, all the organization. Sometimes they just there is voluntary attendance so big that the guild flourishes. Some guilds don't flourish at all. So you see that okay, the meetings get cancelled a lot and so forth. So yeah, it's inevitable sometimes.
But how do you balance the timing? Architect, so I can spend all my time driving the architecture, but if someone is in a mission and he has to produce tickets for the mission,
Mm-hmm.
that then also is in a guild that may be full-time requirement.
Very-
All the projects will hold. How do you handle that?
Yeah, good question actually. That the question was how we handle time joining the guild or doing the guild work. I guess each person has to manage their own personal time in that sense, but it's true that most of the time when somebody is running a guild, they take, for instance, in our guild we have defined that you would take maybe 1 day a week at maximum to run this guild. Not that you are not putting too much effort to run it. But it's a good question that maybe some guilds, even architecture guild, could be the one that it could be a full-time job basically. I agree. But I guess the big benefit of having so many people in the guild is that you realize that you can offload all that decision making and especially like discussions on that guild meeting and in the channel as well. So lots of the stuff actually happens in Slack in async form. So you can get all the answers there. You don't really put full time there. You can have your own task that you're working on as an engineer, and just if you come up with a good idea, have a side thread in Slack. But yeah, after all, I mean, if anybody would join all the guilds, basically you're free to do so. But if you would, then definitely you would be, cluttered in your time. That was actually a very good question. I haven't even thought of it from that angle. I mean, definitely I understand that angle that sometimes people run out of time, myself including. But the fact that maybe guild work sometimes on its own takes a full-time job, good point. I guess if it starts to take a full-time job, for instance, we have, like infrastructure, we have a separate team, which actually is not fully running in this kind of system. Also for site reliability, we have a separate team, DevOps, tooling, and so forth. Coaching is also pointed out here on the slide, which we do have a separate team, but it's not even engineering related that much. Go on.
How are tribes communicating with each other?
Good question. How tribes communicate? So recently, we have grown that big that there is one more level above tribes, which is the director level basically. So the tribe engineering managers then are under some director. That's one way that engineering managers at least communicate. But the other thing that this kind of framework actually gives you is, I mean, there are guilds, of course, where people communicate, but also, as you can see those lines here on the screen, the dotted lines, then often it happens that an engineer, and they are free to do so, joins a mission that is actually led by people from another tribe. And we really encourage this to happen, and that actually helps a lot. Also, I can say that at some point when COVID hit, and I don't know what happened, well, basically we had all the tribes were on site. Like if you had a tribe in Tallinn, that was a Tallinn-based tribe. And then we had tribe in Tartu, and it was Tartu-based tribe. But at some point, of course, we turned into like more flexible workplace, which means that there were tribes that are multi-site. Nowadays, I would say like 50% of the tribes already, or even more, are multi-site. And what I want to say about it is that actually helps to communicate with people who are on that different site than you. So for instance, if I'm Tallinn-based and I work with people that are in Prague but are in my tribe, then when I communicate with them, when later on I actually interact with somebody in Prague, for some reason it's much easier for me to interact with them. Maybe I have seen already them on some meeting or whatever, and because I know that those people know each other, they know that they know me each other, or this is how the chain goes. So that's actually one aspect of it that helps with communicating. Good question though, and I would say that that's definitely one of the aspects where this kind of framework really works like pretty well. Not saying that it's perfect, of course, but much better than having separate teams. Okay, let's move on. What the mission framework promised, at least in the beginning. So it's a flatter organization. the main idea is that if we used to have like 7 engineers in one team, now we have maybe 20, and that inevitably already gives you like 3 times less managers. So, and that has happened basically. Of course, now after we made this move, we have all grown after that, so we are not that flat anymore. So no engineer actually has any specific privileges most of the time, and roles are rotating. So for instance, some of the roles that we have, mission lead, of course, when a mission is run, it's not a rotating role, but in that sense that when another mission is run, then whoever wants to take the initiative to be the lead, they can be. And sometimes even juniors are leading missions and doing a good job on that. Actually, it's answering the question that was asked before, that how are tribes communicating. Often the mission lead does lots of the job, as well as actually we have launchpad lead, so the maintenance, or mostly like static form of the tribe. I say static, but actually it's not correct. I can explain. Has a lead, and the lead is a rotating role, of course. So like every quarter or every 4th month or so, it gets rotated usually. But what I meant by launchpad not being static is that actually when you work as an engineer on the launchpad, then every time somebody goes to a mission, somebody lands a mission on the launchpad, or somebody maybe goes to vacation or whatever, the team actually changes all the time. So it's not that you work with 7 people on launchpad and this is the 7 people that you work on launchpad for half a year. No, during that half a year, usually work on launchpad maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then already there are some changes in who is in your team, immediate team.
I just wanted to add that the Slack structure of agile contributes to the inter-tribe communication very much, because there is a public channel for every tribe, and when open thread, everybody can contribute to this.
Yes, I see that you know something about Pipedrive.
I used to.
So basically, yeah, we are utilizing Slack a lot. So Slack is our main communication channel, and so every tribe, of course, has their private Slack channel, but also the public Slack channel, where if you want to communicate with some tribe, every tribe actually has a product ownership or some area that they own. Not always it's product, sometimes it's something technical. But then if you have an issue with that part, you just go to that tribe's Slack channel and ask the question there. This is the default way of communicating. There is a great degree of freedom to choose what you work on as an engineer in this formation. This is something that I see that when we started with Mission Framework, it was truly fully free, or maybe not fully, but at least to me as an engineer who doesn't care, it felt that, oh, I can go this mission, I join this mission, then I go there, probably there was an engineering manager of mine as well, trying to direct me to the right direction or where I was needed, but I didn't feel like it. Maybe right now it's a bit more has tilted to the side that engineers don't have that much freedom, but nevertheless we still emphasize on it that it's important, and there is some degree of it. They can at least express it, and it will be taken into account. It's just that I think sometimes it might happen that an engineering manager would see that that person is actually needed on Launchpad, you can't go on a mission or something like that. Yes, self-organized skills, that's already what I told. And yes, as there are less managers actually don't have time to deal with people that much. So at some point when we were experimenting with 40 plus people in one tribe, then it was even like self-management model of some kind, or basically people were very, very free to do and organize their work themselves to do what they thought needs to be done. The mindset is pretty much there still, I would say, but it's just that we have come down to 20 people in a tribe. And the feedback culture, I mean, it's not necessarily unique to Pipedrive or the mission framework, of course, but we just have made it very clear that this is important for us. Any questions so far? So I'm just pointing out some of the challenges. Most of them are, I guess, the ones that we have just faced, and I'll just try to recap how we dealt with them. So of course we got hit by COVID. It actually didn't affect the setup as much as would have thought. As I said, over time, of course, we turned into hybrid work. Not over time even, it was like pretty quickly that it happened. So that's the difference it brought, that before there used to be every tribe in a single location. Now people are actually all around the world, not all around the world, usually it's all like based in Europe actually for development, which is good for time zones. But still, people are working remotely more and so forth, so it's a different story right now. Like literally we had a launchpad room, and when somebody was going on a mission, they usually then moved to a different room with their team. So this kind of physical movement right now is no more happening like this most of the time. We have had great product strategy changes during, I mean, basically it happens every year, but sometimes it even happens mid-year. And this is something that I would say Mission Framework actually copes really well with. We have like the unit that we are working with usually is a mission. A mission nobody asks, I even didn't mention, usually is, I would say, a month to 2, maybe to 3 months of work for 4 engineers, up to 4 engineers. This is how we usually run them. And because of that, of course, that we have divided our work into missions, we are able to, you know, whenever one mission ends, we are able to, you know, reprioritize what will be the next thing that we work. Company sell-off definitely had a huge impact on people leaving and just, you know, rethinking what they want to do and so forth. I think we have coped with that as well pretty good, and the reason is that because of the exact nature of this framework that I just described, where your immediate team actually changes all the time, it's not that big of an issue if somebody, for instance, leaves a company. I'm not saying that we are not trying to prevent it, but still it's much less affecting than in some other moments where your team is very static. So you're actually used to, you know, working with somebody and then working with somebody else. And if that somebody that you used to work with no more is in the company, it's not a big difference for you. Similar story with layoffs, I would say, that we were able to reorganize into new tribes. Sometimes I mean, maybe you were not aware of it, but Pipedrive has had over 2 years now, 2 rounds of layoffs. So yes. Hybrid workspace, what I actually already mentioned, that has definitely brought technical details into our work, which have changed a lot. How we even like think of a tribe or a mission. As I just said previously, it was also attached to some physical together being, but now it's often not. Although we still have this like setup that most of the time when a mission is run, then the mission team has one event at least together. So even if they are from another country, they would get together for a moment. And also, actually one of the challenges over time I see is that although I tend to like this mission framework a lot, I think it is a great balance between having a very stable team and having a hot test system. Because, I mean, I can explain what I mean by that. I haven't worked in a system where there is hot desk, so you go to the office and you literally don't have a place where you're sitting every day. I haven't been in that situation myself, but I know some of my friends have, and what they describe is exactly how I would feel, is that when they go to the office, especially if they go a bit late, they feel anxious that they might not find a good place, and it takes so much effort from them. So in Pipedrive, with this framework, we don't have this issue. But at the same time, I wouldn't want to be that guy who sits in one spot for 20 years as well. So actually, when we are going to missions, when we are doing all sorts of this reorganization, it happens like usually. I mean, naturally it happens just going to mission and landing from mission. Then every, I don't know, third month or so on average, you would actually change your location, which means that yes, you have your spot in the office, but at the same time when you go to a mission, you probably will move to another room, and when you come back to another room, but maybe somebody already took your spot, so you are sitting in another spot. So yeah, it's a good balance, I would say, between being too eager to changing your spot every day, at the same time not staying in one spot forever.
But you also have an option not to come, yes?
Yes, nowadays, yes. So it has changed a bit. I prefer to go to the office still, but yes. But what I wanted to say about the preference of individuals, there are some people who actually prefer staying in one spot forever, like also in Pipedrive. And they are actually free to do so, but they then, need to do it in a way that they would do it. So what I'm saying is that not everybody would find this kind of setup the best. Yes. Do you have some questions meanwhile? Otherwise, I feel that I'm talking and maybe it's just me talking.
Are there some challenges with the personalities of people? Meaning that if you recruit somebody, do you have to focus on specific qualities?
Absolutely. So very good question. That what are there some values, I would call them, that we are looking for when we recruit people? And it's actually absolutely true. I will get into it even later on, but the idea is that I believe that like oftentimes you can trust people or you cannot trust people. And basically you can control them by not trusting them. But you would guess that, okay, if I hire like hundreds of people and then I trust them, probably it won't work. And I can tell you that most probably it wouldn't work. But what you can do is when you hire each one separately and you tell them that I'm going to trust you to do the best job, then the day one they come to your company and you actually act in a way that, yes, I now trust you. I mean, I told you on the interview that I will trust you, so yeah, go on and do your job. Then they have this mindset that, okay, I'm trusted, but at the same time I understand I have this responsibility. And by doing so, you don't get people who you wouldn't be trusting, basically, and who are not doing their job if you give them, this trust. At least that's my take on it. That's exactly what I have observed in Pipedrive. So, for instance, most importantly, I would say it's about just getting your job done versus slacking off. This is exactly what I tell them during interviews that, and I was told the same actually, that we expect you to want to do your job, but nobody is going to be controlling you. So you're welcome, okay. And if you kind of agree with that on the interview, you come to the work and yeah, first day you're okay. No, we have a good onboarding program, not talking about that, but maybe, on third week when you have done your onboarding, you're literally like there that, oh, nobody is checking on me. Okay, I better do some work because they are trusting me to do it.
If you don't do the work, then you can't train it right, I guess, or at least nobody's going to want you.
So yeah, the question is, if you don't do your work, what would happen? I guess because of the feedback, you would still, people will figure out that, yeah, you're slacking off and it's not encouraged to do so.
Social punishment.
Yes. But how we actually treat this hiring, or many other companies do similarly, but I think Pipedrive, especially on the Estonian market, has done it the best so far, is that we have a very clear set of company values that we are following. And the first value is internal drive, which is exactly what I just told you. There are other values like don't ruin other people's days or so forth, that we expect you to want to do what you want, or reach for greatness is one of them, which means that we expect you to just wanting to become better. And if you communicate these things well, then actually you get people to buy into this better, and they literally want to follow these values. Okay, let's move on. I don't have any idea about the time, by the way. Let me take a look. Oh, I have spent some time. One thing that I want to express, I think the most, is that even in Pipedrive, where we have a structure that is changing a lot, I would say, people still forget that there is no single thing. Like if I say single thing, what I mean by the thing is like a setup of something that would work forever. I mean, it's also true for your car, but I mean especially like a setup of work. For instance, if you start going to the office every day, then at some point you might feel that you don't want to go to the office. And similarly, I don't know, of course we have stand-ups, for instance, right now, but believe it or not, if you have stand-ups 10 years in a row every day, one day you might feel that, oh, let's not have a stand-up, or let's have it in written form or somehow different. So basically that's the basic idea I'm trying to express here, that whatever it is that you see that is working well today, it is not going to work well forever and ever and so forth. So you need to be always curious in adapting to the situation, basically. Yes, but overall, just to make it binary, I have figured out that there is a big split between everything in software development, and it's split between chaos and regulations. What I mean by this, of course, is that you can have a total chaos where everybody is doing whatever they are doing and nobody has a clue what is going on, or you can have a very over-regulated organization where everybody needs to follow some rules that are strictly set. The rules are not maybe changed that often and so forth. So obviously you can't have one or the other, nor the other. And this is exactly a balance you need to have. So you need to have enough chaos. At the same time, there needs to be some framework to follow. And the framework itself, of course, has to also evolve and all of that. So, but that's like part of the chaos. So you could express the same thing like in different aspects. Like you can have something that is novel you can work on, or your own safety net around it. You can have iterative approach to waterfall, freedom to boundaries. Well, however you put it, but the idea is same. You can have more stable environment or a more moving or changing environment. You can have more planning versus more actually doing something or building something. And I would say that all of these things are actually on the same scale of predictability to unknown. And for me, it's pretty much the same scale. So it's like whether having more chaos, more movement, or more regulations and more static environment. And there has to be a balance. And overall, my main point about it is that I see that over time we realize more and more that, well, it's also because there is so much chaos, we of course start building regulations. But that's one aspect of it. But the other aspect of it is that people are just getting more liberal and they just don't like the regulations that are controlling them. So this balance gets more and more into this direction, that regulations are heavier, or just there needs to be more chaos basically. And that's exactly what I'm here to tell, that most of the time you should just embrace the chaos, have some regulations that need to be evolving, but and the regulations then start to grow because there is too much chaos, but then you should get rid of some of the regulations and embrace the chaos. Okay, do you want to have a question about that before I mention some things, how to get stuff done within the chaos? No, I already showed the title and it's so intriguing that everybody wants to see what's after that. I wish I knew. Oh, okay. I mean, I don't know how to get stuff done in chaos, at least. I mean, on a personal level or engineering level, you just need to get your work done. That's it. But I can just tell you what I feel from the management perspective of people, that yeah, these are just a few slides that is basically all my wisdom as a manager. So first off, of course, it's I think very important to be open to people, like communicate openly. Of course, as a manager, there are some aspects that sometimes you need to keep for your own, but it doesn't mean hiding it from them or lying directly or something like that. But yeah, of course, there are tricky situations. But most importantly about it is that you communicate the expectations. I actually said it to the slide exactly because of what I already told you, is that, for instance, if you communicate the expectations about company values to them, it makes it very easy for them to adapt to those values. And while you communicate that to them, you can already understand whether they, also want to follow these values or not. And if they don't, and it is an open communication, they would right away already tell you that, oh, this is a nice, idea, but I don't like it. I don't want to follow it. But it's true also on a, minor level, smaller level. Less meetings. Although meetings are, of course, good way of communicating. In a bigger organization, there tends to be, a trend that we need more meetings because, there are so many things to discuss for each stuff. We need a meeting, and you're a very smart guy. We need you on every meeting. So overall, I'm trying to be mindful of that less meetings is more. Especially when it comes to engineers, because I'm the representative of engineers, and I'm just trying to get away meetings from them. I'm not saying that they don't have any meetings, but I'm very mindful of the fact that I wouldn't want them to actually do the engineering work mostly, or at least as much as they can, so they wouldn't be sidetracked by meetings. Similarly, less process. This is what I already described, basically, that more rule set and process is bad. At the same time, no process is also bad, so don't get me wrong. I don't think anarchy or chaos as everything would work. So I think some kind of framework and values is a good thing. Definitely less manual procedures. Well, I think it's pretty obvious why. Just so it would scale. Otherwise, you need to, you need to build the process around how to do the manual procedures. If somebody needs to click a button every day, but if that person just gets sick or goes to vacation, then somebody else needs to, and then you need to manage who does it and blah. So if you just automate it, it's all much easier. As for planning ahead, I see one of the things that I constantly need to remind all my peers is that let's not plan ahead too much for too long. The reason is exactly because of my title, that stuff is changing, and this is just the wisdom I have gained in 20 years, that it's just not worth planning ahead for, I don't know, a year or even half a year. When somebody presents me a timeline, and there are, in Pipedrive terms, we would have missions, and there is a mission a year from now that, oh yeah, we run this mission then in December. I'm like, no. Maybe yes, but it gives me no value to see it on the timeline, because I'm pretty sure that something will happen meanwhile. Maybe we don't even need this thing to do. But at the same time, it's very important when you go to work that you know what to focus your current work on, and what you need to be doing today, but also what we are where we are heading, or what is the next mission we want to run, and so forth. As a mission lead, you want to plan for something. So the strategy I have is that to have a rather short plan, like more concrete plan. I would say that it's about a quarter ahead or so. So yeah, a few months, and then some longer vision in what we want to achieve. And even that vision is, of course, changing. If I say longer vision, I usually say that the vision is for a year. So yes, a few months from now is maybe pretty understandable what we want to do, but as for longer time period, we just have a vision of what we want to achieve. Maybe on product level, that yes, we want to deliver this cool feature. On general terms, we don't even know what exactly will be the details about the feature. Yes, trust, pretty much as I already described, that I trust my people to do their job. If I wouldn't, I would need to manually or maybe automatically, but be checking on them. I just think it's not worth it, and it doesn't scale and so forth. And also, I mean, just personally, I feel that people are worth trusting. I remember I moved into a new apartment like already 10 years ago, and in that house there was a guy, so it was a neighbor of mine, became a neighbor of mine, who everybody had trouble with. And when I moved there, then the neighbor also tried to, like buy me on his side, that, oh, like everybody's bad, and I would, need to work with him. And then on some random occasion we started to discuss it, and then pretty soon we got into the position where he said, people are not worth trusting. And that was the moment where I felt that, yeah, I think this is where we differ. Like, I believe that by default people are worth trusting. It's just, yeah, of course, I mean, I understand if you are in a really bad situation and you give somebody, I don't know, a bad command or whatever, they would do it, of course. But by default, especially if you have hired them and validated those people and given them some purpose in life, then they are worth trusting. And also, as a manager, often it's important to delegate, which is really good actually for others also to do or to expand what they are doing. For instance, we have Launchpad lead, as I already described, or mission leads, or even some other roles that people are taking. Then it's for them it's really good to do something that maybe as a manager you would be by default be doing. I mean, a very tedious example, but it's just organizing next team event. I mean, I'm a manager. Should I do it? Well, by default, yes, but I mean, anybody can do it, and the people are really happy about doing it. And at the same time, maybe I have it's my job that it happens basically, but at the same time, I'm basically responsible for it. But it doesn't mean that I can't like delegate. Or what I mean by that is that they only need to do it one time. I maybe need to think ahead that yes, I have to do it like, I don't know, 6 times a year, but that person just do the next one. That's it, and then let's see how it continues. Oh, events. I'm not even sure if it fits on this slide or the other. I just mentioned the event. It's what I mean by events is that when I worked as an engineer, I used to. Okay, of course, I understood that it's cool to have some get together with your peers, but I mean, it was just fun to eat pizza on company expense. I mean, I didn't care much. But as a manager, I really have started to think differently and I see events as a tool to make people work together better. That's it. I mean, it's not magic. They just get to know each other better, and they understand each other's jokes and whatnot. So, yes. I mean, in some companies, I see that maybe it's not that self-explanatory that those events are needed. But as a manager, I can tell that this is a very good tool, and the money is well spent if you just spend some, usually not that big money on a dinner or whatever it is. Anybody wants to comment or question something? Yes.
What's your philosophy on like administrative tasks that are needed for the team to function? Like, for example, documenting your work so that somebody else can take over. Or
Good question. So, what's my philosophy on what do you call those tasks? Administrative tasks that people need to do in order to basically like do their meta work or something like that. Like, for instance, documenting. I mean, documenting is a good example, I think, because I have an opinion on it. And documenting is, once again, I mean, I would go back here, I think, where documenting too much is not good, actually. And mostly, I mean, often as an engineer, I get asked a lot like, oh, do you have documentation on your code? But I have worked as an engineer, as I say, for 20 years, And I rarely have seen documentation being useful, especially if you build something inside the house, inside the company. Not saying that you should have no documentation, no. I think it's very good to have a little documentation. For instance, documenting your endpoints. I think it's a good thing. But actually getting into all the details that is in your code within the documentation, it's way too much work. At the same time, it gets out of date very quickly. Somebody needs to maintain it or not maintain it. I mean, and even if it is not out of work, not out of date, so it's accurate documentation, even then, often enough, people would just prefer going to the code and checking it from the code instead of just going to the documentation. So my take on it is that most of the documentation actually needs to be in code, in that sense that, and not even like in forms of comments, but in forms of just structuring your code well. And that's how you document your code. You just give your variables good names, your functions good names, so forth, and you structure it in a logical way. You put it into services in a logical way. Then yes, it's a good idea to, as I said, maybe have your endpoints documented. Maybe you have a high-level service overview, how services work together. But even that documentation gets out of date really quickly. So that's basically my take on it. I hope it answered the question, though. But it was a good question. Thanks. Yeah.
How you evaluate the effectiveness of manager?
How you evaluate an effectiveness of manager? Luckily, I don't need to do it myself because I'm just a manager of people, not manager of managers. But how it's done for me, for instance, or like how they evaluate me being effective or not, feedback, of course, is the main source of truth. But also sometimes there are some feedback from peers, as well as, like for a manager, mostly actually from the, what we call them, not minions, but the subordinates. I think usually we call direct reports. But yeah, recently one person joined my team who started me call boss. Hey boss, boss. And then I told him maybe I should start you call a minion. So, but because I pointed it out, he's even doing it even more. So yes, the feedback is one of those things, but also as a manager, you're often expected to not only manage your team, but still have some other bigger ideas in mind as well. For instance, like improve something in some area for the company. And for that, usually on some level at least, I mean, in Pipedrive we use OKRs, OKR framework, and so some OKRs are set and followed, even if they are not directly set, but maybe you have just stepped up to improve, I don't know, documentation in general in the organization, and then that can be somehow maybe measured. Yes?
Who has the final say? Let's say that you disagree with your direct report on how something should be implemented. Is it you or is it your direct report who decides what is done?
Good question. Who has the final say, like if me or my direct report, how something should be done? I mean, in my team, at least, I can't tell for all the others. I think it's my direct report who has the final say. And my philosophy on it is that I'm nowadays not writing code myself, so they are actually doing the implementation. So although I'm technical, so I'm able to, I mean, previously I used to work as an engineer, so I'm able to, of course, give my own opinion on it and kind of understand it if I even want. Sometimes I even look into some pull requests, for instance, of some newcomers to understand how well they are doing. But after that, at some point, I basically, you know, once again, I trust them to do what they are doing. Like similarly, even if I have already agreed with my direct report how something should be implemented, I'm actually often enough not going to look into how they actually implemented it. I just see the outcome of it. They say, yeah, I did it the way that we just described, and I'm like, yeah, great success. And I see that, yes, like the service is up and working and we have this new feature, cool. But actually I might go into the code and see that, oh, you did it with a for loop, but we didn't agree with that. So I'm saying I'm basically trusting them to do it the way they want to do it, or yeah. But at the same time, if there would be a big conflict in how something has to be done, I think then I would escalate it into, for instance, we have this hard killed, which is when it's a technical question, then yes, I would say that I would just escalate it there. By the way, hard killed usually doesn't then force you to also like do it in a specific way usually. Maybe sometimes if it's very, just doesn't fit, then it could be that everybody is just telling you, no, don't do it this way or whatnot. If you need some new access or database infrastructure, infra team is providing us this, maybe they wouldn't even provide it, but that would be like already too far. You would understand that nobody likes this idea and you wouldn't do it, at least in Pipedrive, this is how it works. But by default, if it's not a big issue, then I would say that you as an engineer have the final say. For instance, I can give you an example that I was a manager of some team that were building some kind of synchronization of data from one external provider into Pipedrive. And my idea was pretty clear that we should use, in Pipedrive we're using Kafka mostly, that we should definitely put whatever the external provider provides us into Kafka and then just consume it from Kafka. So we have all the data in Kafka. That's just one step, just commit to Kafka, we have it there, and then we can build it on our side however we consume it, reconsume it or whatever. But they were just insisting that no, let's not do it. Whenever the webhook comes in, let's just directly pass it down to HTTP chain basically. And although I think my idea was superior, in the end I was not the one writing it, they did it, it's done now, it works. Although, to be honest, this is, for me it's a good point to say it, talk about it, because right now they see that, yeah, it makes sense that probably we need Kafka there, but that doesn't matter, we can improve it later on. At least at that point in time I gave them I trusted them to do their job. They were able to actually succeed. In the end, in engineering you can do things in many different ways. It doesn't eventually matter. If it works, it works. It's not stupid if it works, basically. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, it's not so simple that you can just draw a line and say, oh, it's me, always. Or some place it is, but that's usually not the best way. So yeah, it's complex like life is.
But yeah, the question was about who has the final say, right? So I think sometimes when it's something less technical, then it could be that I have the final say nowadays, because I'm kind of, I have kind of distanced myself from being the top technical guy nowadays. So they are the ones actually writing the code, and they have a final say on that.
Directly connected to that, how much freedom are there in decisions like this? Is it like a set of languages, a set of services, or is every mission completely free?
Mm-hmm.
And then,
good question. So how much freedom is there for instance, tech stack decisions? There used to be much more, but nowadays we have actually shrinked it down. And the reason is very clear, because once again, if you have so much freedom, you get a zoo of different technology being used. While I'm really a proponent of this idea that often you can, if you have a hammer and everything looks like a nail, you can actually use the hammer for quite many things. It's just good to have a saw and something else with you. So in Pipedrive, yes, nowadays we have shrunk down to just a handful of technologies, and we can see that we can have everything done. Just to give an example, we have a good knowledge about MySQL. We are sharding MySQL, so like per company, for instance, having a database, we have a setup for that. I don't know, whatever, like backups, all of it, how to run queries, how to debug, everything. And then we realized that we are hitting some limits on MySQL, and we just checked out that, Postgres doesn't have this limit. But we didn't go down the route of having Postgres just because of that. So we actually used MySQL in another way to achieve what was needed to achieve. And I think it was a good decision for that specific purpose, because we have basically everything in MySQL when it comes to relational databases. And we have Kafka, we have some other things that we are using. Mostly by default we are using Node.js. So that's also a decision. Yes, we have Golang as well, and we have some PHP and some services that are actually, because it was more free before, maybe using C# or something else, but we see that it's very hard, those people maybe who built it using C# have already left the company. It's hard to keep them up to date, these services and all of that, so maintenance is a good thing. I mean, it's a good idea to have some tech stack that is uniform. Or even we have gone a bit further, that we have a uniform default framework for building, for instance, backend service. Once again, there wasn't one, then somebody built one, but another team built another, and fast forward a few years, we have 5 different standard frameworks of building a backend service, and then we now combine it all in one. So if you were to be a Pipedrive engineer and build a backend service, then by default, unless you have a really good reason to use something else, you would use that framework, and it makes sense. On front-end side, we are actually down that route right now. So there used to be an option to use Vue and React, and I mean Vue and React, that war in Pipedrive was ended pretty quickly. I mean React won, but when it comes to, for instance, state management within React, there's like a zoo or like CSS writing. You have style components. You have, I don't even know the names of these things. You have so many different approaches, and we have all of them. But we are now doing the same, similar, that we are trying to shrink it down. So basically, you wouldn't have that much freedom. The reason for that, I mean, I'm already looping in the same idea, but the reason for that is basically just to be more efficient in writing the actual meaningful, business logic, getting it done. Okay, I have one more slide. It's about forming a team. What I mean by that, or the approach I'm looking here, is what I'm actually. This is a new slide, by the way. I just typed these things down. I started to realize that I actually do these things, but I never told anybody. But basically, when I'm running a mission, for instance, the next mission I'm running, I already in my head, although people are free to choose which mission to join, I still in my head try to mix-match them. I mean, I know the people, I know what they are doing technically, I know what they are doing personally, and so forth. And what are the things that I'm actually looking into? And believe it or not, actually, one of the things is diversity. That it's a really good idea to have people from different background, from different seniority, new joiners versus old-timers. I mean, there are reasons to each one of them, basically. For instance, new joiner versus old-timer, the idea is that the new joiner would gain knowledge about, from the old-timer. At the same time, the new joiner actually, depending on the level and, eagerness, they might bring some new ideas on the table. If I put together 2 old-timers, they wouldn't even, consider anything new because they have worked together already, and they would, similar story with junior versus senior. I mean, sometimes it's just a knowledge transfer idea, and different backgrounds, basically the same thing. And also front-end versus back-end, if possible, I try to mix-match it or see how it goes, because oftentimes front-end people tend to work more on front-end missions and so forth, but it's good to see them work together to form a team. I hope it makes sense, I mean, as I just described it, but I can tell you that it definitely makes sense to help the team just work together better in the long run. Also, of course, it's a bit generic, I understand, but I try to look into the fit of between the people that I'm putting together or assigning together, basically. That sometimes you see that some persons just do not like each other for whatever the reason. It could work out actually either way. When they work together, they will solve their issue, or it might escalate. So, I'm not saying that we have a big issue with that in Pipedrive. Actually, I don't think we do, but still, there are some details that probably I keep in mind when I, I'm not even sure what to call it. When I propose somebody to lead a mission and have somebody else join that mission, basically that's what I'm doing. I'm not forming a team like assigning people. Somebody will say that, no, I don't want to join it. I accept that response, of course. A really important detail is that I feel that sometimes I'm actually failing, or I have failed at least in the past, and I'm thinking about it more right now, is that it's important to set people up for success. Especially as a manager, you understand what it takes to get this job done. It's important not to assign somebody on that job who you see that would struggle on it. It's some kind of like growth is good. I mean, if you see that a junior can do something that is really hard, but they can actually do it, then of course let them do it. But it's very important to give people the tasks that you see that they will be able to tackle. Yeah. There are of course once again many aspects into it, that sometimes maybe the task is just needs some communication and you see that they would fail on that or whatever. So what I'm saying is that these are details that I have in my head. I probably never communicate these to anybody. And yeah, some sort of personal touch. I think I should put the personal touch actually here. I'm not sure why it's here. Because what I meant by the personal touch is that as a manager, I definitely don't want to be that guy who is just a boss of yours. I have some sort of friendship with the people I'm managing. It's also just I guess my own personal trait, but this is how it is, and I see that having this is beneficial. At least gives some meaning for my own life. Any questions?
Things you don't like about the structure.
Sorry?
Things which you don't like.
Are there things that I don't like about structure? Which kind of structure you mean?
Well, this old Pipedrive mission framework.
About Pipedrive mission framework and the setup that we have, are there things that I don't like? Definitely there are. I'm just very open-minded in what it takes to change it. For instance, I can give you an example. I actually prefer times that were before COVID, where we had most of the people coming to the office. I enjoyed it very much. And I'm doing the same myself today as well. Although I like that little flexibility it gives, like the current times, so time to time I am able to work from home, but for whatever reasons. But at the same time, I like these times. And also similarly, actually, our office team and others, they still want people to come to the office. So it's like a policy, like, oh, let's make the office cool so people would like to come to the office. But I would never command people that, okay, I mean, I understand that situation right now is like this. It's like in Pipedrive, in the world, in the market, everywhere. So I would never command everybody, no, you have to come now to the office. I would much rather fix it in a way that office is just a cool place where you actually want to come and you see the benefits of coming there. And yeah, or like even if somebody's working remotely all the time, I try to not, take on them that, oh, you're working remotely. I was given a good feedback about it. I was actually just making fun of, well, he's a very nice engineer and he's doing good job, but I was making fun of him all the time that, oh, you're remotely, in different aspects. And then he gave me a good feedback that, this over the longer period of time, he realizes that maybe I would want him to not work from the home that much. But and I mean, I also told him directly this, but he really wants to work from home, and I need to accept it. I hope it answered your question. Your question was what I don't like about that. I don't like, for instance, one of the tendency there is, which is that tribes have their own missions. So at some point, there used to be lots of missions where people from multiple tribes were actually joining. But recently, more and more, it's been that each mission has a specific tribe that basically runs the mission, and maybe not even a single person from another tribe is joining that mission. That is one aspect that I see that I don't like, and is somehow has moved that way. Any other questions? How much time did I take? Ooh, 1.5 hours almost. Okay, I have nothing else to add. I mean, feel free to ask me questions, a bit more questions. And yes, the main point I want to make is that stuff is constantly changing, and you need to just adapt, accept, and then adjust again, because nothing works forever. Yeah, I can be a bit more philosophical also about the change, but I will not cover it here right now. Let's do it next time. Thank you. Yes, and this loop is endless, so you need to adapt, then adjust, and then once do that again. Thank you. That's it. I guess we can take a few more questions maybe you have before we actually end the stream.
About the GDPR, do you feel, or what are your feelings about that? Can you make a product that is as good as you want it to be while also complying?
So the question was about GDPR. Can we, pretty straightforward, can we build a product that is compliant with GDPR? Yes. I mean, when GDPR came out, and I looked at the news that this kind of thing has been decided in EU, I was like, what are they even thinking? Like, who is going to implement it? But well, I mean, if there's a push for it, then you need to comply. And in Pipedrive as well, I think I can tell it now because it's in the past. But we were not GDPR compliant previous year. But at least in my area right now, we are 100%. Maybe not 100, but 99% GDPR compliant. So we did a good job previous year about it. It's not that tricky actually. I mean, GDPR basically just tells you that whatever the end user is called, there are specific terms for it, right? But basically, when they want to remove all their data from your system, then you should be able to do that. And if they want to get the data, you should be able to provide them this data, what you are storing about them, and so forth. So they're like basically it's just about not persisting too much data, or at least being able to delete it when asked for it. Okay.
Maybe some cool stories.
Cool story about what? I definitely have.
You're working pretty long. You definitely have some cool stories.
Well, cool stories, I guess, are mostly about incidents. We actually had a huge incident today, but maybe that wasn't that cool. It was just one data center was down. But once, I mean, I can also give you, I just recall one incident that we had. It was more than a year ago already. Basically, we're just running a migration script to migrate some data to a new form in MySQL database. I mean, it was, I think, run by some other PHP script, so which just was called by an endpoint. And the question was, we were running it company by company. In Pipedrive, each company has, like for the main data set, they have one database, MySQL database, like a separate database, but same structure basically for every company. And we had tested it out in and out many times, and then the question was, okay, shall we run it for 100% in one region? And the guy who was actually running it was, yeah, sure, no problem. And I was like, oh, wait, let's first try it on, I don't know, 5% of the companies or something. So we ran it on 5%, luckily, because then what turned out, of course, was that something went wrong. But what went wrong was that we had tested it in and out many times, but when we were running it from our back office with the tool that we were using to run it, when it got a response that basically an error, then it retried. But what happened was that in live environment with a big data set that some companies have, it took just so much time. It was, I think, 1 minute timeout or something. So it just took more time than 1 minute. So the service just retried. Well, not the service, but whatever the service was calling it. So there were 2 migrations running in parallel, and that was something that we had never tested. So if you run the same query like 2 times, and if it ran 2 times, it was actually converting MySQL data like in JSON you have a JSON column in MySQL, and it was just converting that data in that JSON. And we were using JSON merge function in MySQL. And if you do it 2 times, if you do it once, everything works. It merges like 2 values. But if you have that values twice, it generates an array which has those 2 values. And it was an unexpected behavior once again. That was not it. So it was a problem that we messed up the data set for those companies that we ran the script. So I mean, it's another story how we then went along to fix it. But also when we did it only for 5% of the companies, we created so many updates in the database that we have a Debezium setup that was picking up these updates. So the Debezium died. And that was not it. I mean, everything is relying basically on Debezium creating those events. And then once they kind of gave more memory to Debezium, so the Debezium was able to run, then the services that were consuming these messages, many of them died because there was just too much data in it. So all in all, what I'm just saying, it was a great story that everything works. Let's try on 5% in one region. What can go wrong? I mean, everything works for sure. And actually, just 5%, it took down a lot of stuff for a while. And I can only imagine if we had run it for 100% at once, then we would have just killed the whole data center for, I don't know, days, maybe.
You accidentally implemented a canary system.
Sorry?
You accidentally implemented this canary system where you take like a certain percentage of them, only run it on them, see if it breaks their stuff first.
So you actually,
What is it called exactly?
you mean the chaos system? Or canary system, yes. I understand what you mean, but in that sense that I know what canary system is, but I don't understand what you mean by the implementing exactly in this case. Okay, I hope it counted as a cool story. It was pretty generic. I mean, I didn't give you much details, or maybe it was too detailed. You can go and check MySQL JSON merge function. And also not automatically retry in your API clients if something goes wrong. Oh, there is one more question.
I think you promised to tell us why do you prefer JavaScript?
Oh, very good point. So I promised to tell you why I prefer JavaScript. I mean, to be honest, nowadays I think I prefer TypeScript. Maybe sometimes JavaScript. If it's a smaller one, then smaller service, then JavaScript just has less overhead, so I even prefer JavaScript. So, but why I prefer JavaScript to other languages available nowadays, and we have much better languages, like we have Golang, we have Rust, we have Java, we have whatever we have. I mean, I've also built in these languages. Why would I prefer JavaScript? Because I only shifted to JavaScript fully when I joined Pipedrive. Like previously, I only on front-end side, but on back-end, I hadn't used JavaScript at all, mostly. But nowadays, I truly believe JavaScript is the best language to write your code with, although it has its own quirks. But the main reason for that is that most of the data that we are dealing with is JSON. I mean, there are historical reasons, obvious reasons. It's human readable, it's nice, it has a great structures. So, I mean, if you look around the data you're working with, I bet most of it is JSON as well. You don't want to see XML. You don't want to see, I don't know, many other ways of displaying data. And if you're working with JSON, then the best tool to work with JSON, data in, data out, is JavaScript. So if you just need to transform JSON, because that is what your services are mostly doing, then JavaScript is just the best tool to do. I mean, it's just, in syntax, everything, I mean, you understand JSON is JavaScript object notation, so that's why it is that way. I hope I gave you a good answer. But also, I like that it's single-threaded. I like the async syntax and all of that. Single-threaded is a good thing when you work with microservices, so you scale it up, you understand that it multiplies the threads and so forth.
Single we can take a break now.
Yes,
and,
absolutely.
Then we can
Make a house.
mingle and yeah.
Okay, but thank you. See you around.